One of the top issues this election cycle is health care. Fox News correspondent Rich Edson reports on the candidates' competing visions for how the health care system should be run.
Affordable Care Act needs to stay. Trump doesn't have a plan in place whatsoever at all.
The debate over building on Obamacare or scrapping it.
My family, we've paid almost double what we used to pay for our insurance premiums, and we're restricted on the doctors we see.
President Trump says he wants to terminate Obamacare while protecting some of the law's more popular provisions. Former Vice President Joe Biden promises to defend the Affordable Care Act and spend $75 billion a year reducing its costs and expanding coverage.
What I'm going to do is pass Obamacare with a public option. It'll become Biden care.
The public option would be a government-run insurance plan Americans could choose to buy over private insurance. Biden says it will compete with private plans to reduce costs. Republicans say it is a step towards socialized medicine. Currently, Obamacare has insurance regulations, like keeping millions younger than 26 on their parents' plan and requiring companies to cover those with pre-existing conditions.
We'll always protect people with pre-existing. So I'd like to terminate Obamacare, come up with a brand new, beautiful health care.
Though the president has offered no details on how he'd do that. About 11 million get insurance through an Obamacare market, and the government provides subsidies to most of them. Around 12 million more benefit from Obamacare's expansion of Medicaid. And there's another upcoming element to the future of American health care. The week after the election, the Supreme Court is scheduled to hear arguments on Obamacare and could decide whether to invalidate the entire law. In Washington, Rich Edson, Fox News.